Hello dear students, today we are going to start History Chapter 3 Nationalism in India Part 4. Students, in this part we will cover introduction, how participants saw the movement, the limits of civil disobedience, the sense of collective belonging. Nationalism in India. Students, before starting this, let us recall the contents we discussed in previous part. Students, in previous part, we have seen that Gandhiji started civil disobedience movement. Gandhiji put forward 11 demands to Lord Irwin. In that, he wrote a letter on 31 January 1930 to Viceroy Irwin. In that, he made 11 demands. Some of those demands were of general interest and others were specific demands of different classes, from industrialists to peasants. Students, let us see what were the demands made by Gandhiji in that letter. He demanded abolition of salt tax, that was the main demand, reduce the military expenditure, prohibit intoxicants, release of political prisoners, abolish the CID department, change the ratio between the rupee and the sterling, reduce the rate of land revenue, reduce expenditure on civil administration, impose custom duty on foreign cloth, accept the postal reservation bill, issue licenses of arms to citizens for self-protection. So these demands were made by Gandhiji, but as we have seen, the abolition of salt tax demand was kept on the top because it was the main demand. People were suffering because of the high tax on the salt. Gandhiji wanted that the tax should be abolished. Mahatma Gandhi's letter was in a way an ultimatum. If the demands were not fulfilled by 11 March, the letter stated the Congress would launch a civil disobedience campaign. Irwin was unwilling to negotiate, so Mahatma Gandhi started his famous Salt March, a campaign by his trusted volunteers. He reached to Dandi coast. There he manufactured salt by boiling seawater. So these we have seen the Dandi March or Salt March. Students, as we have noticed that civil disobedience movement was different than the non-cooperation. People were now asked not only to refuse cooperation with the Britishers or to the British as they had done in non-cooperation in 1921 to 22, but also to break colonial laws. Gandhiji asked people not to follow the rules and regulations made by the Britishers, to break the rules and regulations. Thousands in different parts of the country broke the salt law, manufactured salt, and demonstrated in front of government salt factories. Liquor shops were picketed. Peasants refused to pay revenue and chowkidari taxes. village officials resigned, and in many places, forest people violated forest laws. They started going to reserved forest to collect wood and graze their cattle. Many women and children in different parts they supported the movement. We have also seen that peaceful satyagrahis were attacked, women and children were beaten, and about 1 lakh people were arrested. In such a situation, Mahatma Gandhi once again decided to call off the movement and entered into a pact with Irwin on 5th March 1931. By this, and Gandhi-Irwin Pact, Gandhiji consented to participate in Round Table Conference in London, and the government agreed to release the political prisoners. In December 1931, Gandhiji went to London for the conference, but the negotiations broke down and he returned disappointed. With great apprehension, Mahatma Gandhi relaunched the civil disobedience movement. For over a year, the movement continued, but by 1934, it lost its momentum. So students, people, they were having great expectations with the movements, with aspirations and hopes they were joining the movement. Today, we will see how participants saw the movement. As we have seen that people, they were taking the movements in their own ways. Everyone's expectation from the movement was different. With different purposes, they were joining the movement. They were having different expectations, hopes with the movements. With those hopes, they were joining the movements. Now we will see participants of the civil disobedience movement. Students, let us now look at the different social groups that participated in the civil disobedience movement. Why did they join the movement? What were their ideals? What did Swaraj mean to them? Students, Swaraj meant different thing to different people. First, we will see the rich peasants, how they had taken the movement, what were their expectations and aspirations from the movement. In the countryside, rich peasants, communities like Patidars of the Gujarat and Jats of Uttar Pradesh were active in the movement. Being producers of commercial crops, they were very hard hit by the trade depression and falling prices. As their cash income disappeared, they found it impossible to pay the government's revenue demand. And the refusal of the government to reduce the revenue demand led to widespread resentment. They wanted the reduction in the revenue, but government was not doing so. These rich peasants became enthusiastic supporters of the civil disobedience movement. At times, forcing the reluctant members participate in the boycott programs. For them, the fight for Swaraj was a struggle against high revenues, but they were deeply disappointed when the movement was called off in 1931 without the reduction in revenue rates. So when the movement was restarted in 1932, many of them refused to participate as they were joining the movements with great expectations, but when those expectations were not fulfilled, they became disappointed. And when it was again relaunched by Gandhiji, they were not interested in the movement. Now let us see the poor peasantry, how they reacted or what was their expectation to the movement. The poor peasantry were not just interested in the lowering of the revenue demand. Many of them were small tenants, they were small farmers cultivating land they had rented from landlords. They were giving rents to the landlords because they were not having their own lands. As the depression continued, the incomes decreased. The small tenants found it difficult to pay the rent. They wanted the unpaid rent to the landlord to be remitted. They joined a variety of radical movements, often led by socialists and communists, apprehensive of raising issues that might upset the rich peasants and landlords. The Congress was unwilling to support to rent campaign in most places, as these small farmers, they started no rent campaign because they wanted reduction in the rent. So the relationship between the poor peasants and the Congress remained uncertain. So this was the condition of poor peasants and their expectation with the movement. They wanted the reduction in the rent. Business classes. Now we will see what was the expectation of business classes from the civil disobedience movement. Students, a large number of persons and industrialists supported this movement. They wanted protection against imports of foreign goods. They wanted to free the business from colonial restrictions. Students, during the First World War, Indian merchants and industrialists had made huge profits and become powerful. In on expanding their business, they now reacted against colonial policies that restricted business activities. They wanted protection against imports of foreign goods and a rupee sterling foreign exchange ratio that would discourage imports. To organize business interests, they formed the Indian Industrial and Commercial Congress in 1920 and the Federation of the Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industries, that was FICCI, in 1927. Led by prominent industrialists like Purushottam Das Thakurdas and G.D. Birla, the industrialists attacked colonial control over the Indian economy and supported the civil disobedience movement when it was launched. They gave financial assistance and refused to buy or sell imported goods. Most businessmen came to see Swaraj as a time when colonial restrictions on business would no longer exist and trade and industry would flourish without constraints. So, this was the expectation of business classes. They wanted to do free trade with no restrictions by the colonial rulers. But after the failure of Round Table Conference, business groups were no longer uniformly enthusiastic. They were apprehensive of the spread of militant activities and worried about prolonged disruption of business as well as of the growing influence of socialism among the younger members of the Congress. So, industrialists were not in the favor of socialism. Now, we will see the condition of workers and their expectation. from the movement, how they saw the movement. The industrial working classes didn't participate in the civil disobedience movement in large numbers, except in Nagpur region. As the industrialists came closer to the Congress, workers stayed aloof. But in spite of that, some workers did participate in the civil disobedience movement, selectively adopting some ideas of Gandhian program like boycott of foreign goods as part of their own movements against low wages and poor working conditions. There were strikes by railway workers in 1930 and dock workers in 1932. In 1930s, thousands of workers in Chota Nagpur tin mines were, wore Gandhian caps and participated in protest rallies and boycott campaigns. But the Congress was reluctant to include workers' demands as part of its program of struggle. It felt that this would alienate industrialists and divide the anti imperial forces. They didn't want to make angry the industrialists, so they didn't want to support workers in this movement. Let us see how the women saw the movement. Another important feature of civil disobedience movement was a large scale participation of women during Gandhiji's Salt March. Students, it is also one of the difference between the non-cooperation movement and civil disobedience movement. In non-cooperation movement, Gandhiji not allowed women to participate, but we have seen that actively women they had participated in the civil disobedience movement. Students, thousands of women came out of their homes to listen to Gandhiji. They participated in protest marches, manufactured salt, and picketed foreign clothes and liquor shops. Many went to jail. In urban areas, these women were from high caste families. In rural areas, they came from rich peasant households. Moved by Gandhiji's call, they began to see service to the nation as a sacred duty of women. Yet, this increased public role did not necessarily mean any radical change in the way the position of women was visualized. Gandhiji was convinced that it was the duty of women to look after home and family, be good mothers and good wives, and for a long time the Congress was reluctant to allow women to hold a position of authority within the organization. It was in only on their symbolic presence. So students, here we have seen how different social groups they saw the movement, what was their expectation, and how they had taken this. The limits of civil disobedience movement. Students, not all social groups were moved by the abstract concept of Swaraj. One such group was the nation's untouchables, who from around the 1930s had begun to call themselves Dalit or oppressed. For long, the Congress had ignored the Dalits for fear of offending the Sanatanis. Those were the conservative high caste Hindus. But Mahatma Gandhi declared that Swaraj would not come for 100 years if untouchability was not eliminated. He called the untouchables Harijans because Gandhiji wanted the development of everyone. That's why He wanted the development of these low caste people also. He said them Harijans or the children of God, organized satyagraha to secure them entry into temples and access to public wells, tanks, roads, and schools. As these things were prohibited for them, they were facing discrimination in the society, they were not getting equality, but Gandhiji supported them. He himself cleaned toilets to dignify the work of the Bhangi, the sweepers, and persuaded upper caste to change their heart and give up the sin of untouchability. But many Dalit leaders were in on a different political solution to the problems of the community. They began organizing themselves, demanding reserved seats in the educational institutions and a separate electorate that would choose Dalit members for legislative councils. Political empowerment, they believed, would resolve the problems of their social disabilities. They wanted the entry in the administrative system. For that, they wanted separate electorates. Dalit participation in the civil disobedience movement was therefore limited, particularly in the Maharashtra and Nagpur region, where their organization was quite strong. Students, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, who organized the Dalits into the Depressed Classes Association in 1930, clashed with Mahatma Gandhi at the second round table conference by demanding separate electorates for Dalits. When the British government conceded Ambedkar's demand, Gandhiji began a fast unto death because Gandhiji was not in the favor of separate electorate. He thought that it will divide the country or slow down the process of their integration into society. Ambedkar ultimately accepted Gandhiji's position, and the result was the Pune Pact of September 1932. It gave the depressed class reserved seats in provincial and central legislative councils, but they were to be voted in by the general electorate. The Dalit movement, however, continued to be apprehensive of the Congress led national movement. So, this was the expectation of Dalits. Now, what about Muslim people? After the decline of the non-cooperation movement, Khilafat movement, a large section of the Muslim felt eliminated from the Congress. Students, some of the Muslim political organizations in India were also lukewarm in their response to the civil disobedience movement. After the decline of the non-cooperation Khilafat movement, a large section of Muslims felt alienated from the Congress. From the mid 1920s, the Congress came to be more visibly associated with openly Hindu religious nationalist groups like the Hindu Mahasabha. As relations between Hindus and Muslims worsened, each community organized religious processions with militant fervor, provoking Hindu Muslim communal clashes and riots in various cities. Every riot depended the distance between the two communities. So this problem started between the Hindus and Muslims, the disunity started taking place. The Congress and the Muslim League made efforts to renegotiate an alliance, and in 1927 it appeared that such a unity could be forged. The important differences were over the question of representation in future assemblies that were to be elected. Muhammad Ali Jinnah, one of the leaders of Muslim League, was willing to give up the demand for separate electorates if Muslims were assured reserved seats in the Central Assembly and representation in proportion to population in the Muslim dominated provinces. Those were Bengal and Punjab. Negotiations over the question of representation continued, but all hope of resolving the issue at the all parties conference in 1928 disappeared when M.R. Jacker of Hindu Mahasabha strongly opposed efforts at compromise. Students, many Muslim leaders and intellectuals expressed their concern about the status of Muslim as a minority within India. They feared that the culture and identity of minorities would be submerged under the domination of a Hindu majority. So, this was a great fear among the Muslim people. The sense of collective belonging. Students, nationalism spread when people begin to believe that they are all part of the same nation, when they discover some unity that binds them together. But how did the nation become a reality in the minds of people? How did people belonging to different communities, region or language groups develop a sense of collective belonging? Students, as we have seen, nationalism in Europe, their different symbols were taken to develop the sense of collective belonging. Here we will see in India what strategies were applied to develop the sense of collective belonging. Nationalism means that people began to believe that they were all a part of the same nation and discovered some unity which bound them together. For this, sense of collective belonging came partly through the experience of united struggles, but there were also a variety of cultural processes through which nationalism captured people's imagination. History and fiction, folklore and songs, popular prints and symbols all played a part in the making of nationalism. Students, figures or images in the main cultural process, figures or images helped create an image with which people could identify the nation. Devotion to this mother figure came to be seen as evidence of one's nationalism. It was with the growth of nationalism that the identity of India was associated with the image of Bharat Mata. This image was first created by Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay, who wrote the song Vande Mataram in his novel Anand Mat, and widely sung during the Swadeshi movement in Bengal. Moved by Swadeshi movement, Abanindranath Tagore painted his famous image of Bharat Mata. In his painting, Bharat Mata is portrayed as an ascetic figure. She is calm, composed, divine, and spiritual. In subsequent years, the image of Bharat Mata acquired many different forms as it circulated in popular prints and was printed by different artists. Devotion to this mother figure came to be seen as evidence of one's nationalism. Now, Indian folklore also played a vital role in the development of sense of collective belonging. Ideas of nationalism also developed through a movement to revive Indian folklore. In late 19th century, India nationalists began recording folk tales sung by bards and they toured villages to gather folk songs and legends. These tales they believed gave a true picture of traditional culture that had been corrupted and damaged by outside forces. It was essential to preserve the folk tradition in order to discover one's national identity and restore sense of pride in one's past. In Bengal, Rabindranath Tagore himself began collecting ballads, nursery rhymes, and mites and led the movement for folk revival. In Madras, Natesa Sastry published a massive four-volume collection of Tamil folk tales, the folklore of southern India. He believed that folklore was national literature. It was the most trustworthy manifestation of people's real thoughts and characteristics. Folklores, folk tales, ballads were taken so that people can easily understand their tradition, their culture, their history, and they can realize. Now, as we have seen, Indian folklores, ideas of nationalism also developed through a movement to revive Indian folklore. First of folk tales was sung by parts in the villages to give, it should be bards. BARDS at the place of bards in the villages to give a true picture of the traditional culture which was captured and damaged by outside forces. When Britishers they came, they damaged our culture and past. So there was need to realize the people, their culture, their past, their tradition, icon and symbols. Students, during the Swadeshi movement in Bengal, a tricolor flag, red, green, and yellow, was designed. It had 8 lotus representing 8 provinces of British India and a crescent moon representing Hindus and Muslims. By 1921, Mahatma Gandhi designed the Swaraj flag. It was also again a tricolor, red, green, and white flag and had a spinning wheel in the center representing the Gandhian ideal of self-help. Carrying the flag, holding it aloft during the marches became a symbol of defense. So students, in this way different strategies were applied to develop the sense of collective belonging. Reinterpretation of history. The British saw Indians as backward, primitive, and incapable of governing themselves. In response, Indians began looking into the past to discover India's great achievement. They Indians wrote about glorious developments in ancient India in arts and architecture, science and maths, religion and culture, law and philosophy, etc. The glorious time was followed by a history of decline when India was colonized. So, students, in this way, the development of collective sense of collective belonging we have seen. Now we will conclude the chapter. As in the chapter we have seen, a growing anger against the colonial government was thus bringing together various groups and classes of Indians into a common struggle for freedom in the first half of the 20th century. The Congress, under leadership of Mahatma Gandhi, tried to channel people's grievances into organized movement for independence. So, through such movements, the nationalists tried to forge national unity, but as we have seen, diverse groups and classes participated in these movements with varied aspirations and expectations. As their grievances were wide ranging, freedom from colonial rule also meant different things to different people. The Congress continuously attempted to resolve differences and ensure that the demands of one group did not alienate another. This is precisely why the unity within the movement often broke down. The high points of Congress activity and nationalist unity were followed by phases of disunity and inner conflict between groups. In other words, what was emerging was a nation with many voices wanting freedom from colonial rule. So, students, in this way, we have seen the conclusion of the chapter. Test your progress. Students, after the explanation, let us see some questions. Describe the participation of the rich and poor. Sorry, by mistake here double P is there. It should be peasants. Communities in the civil disobedience movement. Evaluate the role of women in the civil disobedience movement. Who had designed the Swaraj flag by 1921? Explain the main features of this Swaraj flag. Why was Pune Pact signed? So, students, I hope easily you can do these questions. Thank you.